All right, welcome everyone to the Product and UX Research Weekly Sync for the Editor Group. This is the December 16th edition, which I just realized I probably had a meeting earlier today where I called it the December 15th meeting, but that's okay. Who cares what day it is? We're just catching up on all things editor. So I only had one agenda item, but I kind of want to get to that last. I'd rather hear a little more about design and research this week. And if we have time, we can get to mine.
Cool.
I will go first. While Michael's writing his point, I just have an update that I literally right before this meeting wrapped up my last session for the benchmarking research. So I'm starting to work on analysis for that study and for the tree test. So that's gonna be what I'm doing over the next couple of days. I will be setting up dovetail projects for them. I have one for the benchmarking study, but I haven't completed the analysis yet. But if you're curious about the videos and such, you can just take a look at the dovetail project early. Let me look at Eric's question. Oh, actually, could you revise your question?
Yeah, so I think this is related to the research you're doing on the tree test for the left nav and baselining that experience. Just calling attention to an issue that I pinged you both on, I believe, earlier today, that is labeled CEO interest because it came up in one of the scaling meeting agendas items, and it relates to like consistency around whether that that top level left nav item is clickable and where it goes, whether it goes to the first item on the page or it has its own distinct landing page separate from the items underneath it. We were talking about this a little bit, Michael, in the context of rearranging the left nav and being consistent about how we apply the patterns around like sub items, and then how we would extend that to things that don't have sub items, like and need just one view. For example, requirements or wiki, which don't have sub items at all. The issue in particular, let me see if I can find it real quick, but it doesn't have a ton of detail, but it basically is just like we should standardize on this because it's repetitive to have two click targets that go to the same place.
I think I did see that. And yeah, so that isn't part of this particular study, but I do think it makes sense. It is probably also important on mobile. I think I've seen this problem come up before where someone was trying to get to the page on mobile or something and they couldn't figure it out. But I'll look into that to see if we have anything related to that in our research.
Yeah, regarding the click, the interaction, it's something I'll probably tackle. I'm just gonna say next year, but it's only like 2 weeks away. But it sounds it sounds really far. But post holidays, probably take a look at that because that's more like an interaction thing that we need to sort out. And this ties into this pattern where we have like where we want to select the second item and like the first sub item in a list, and then there's cases where we don't follow that pattern, and for example in analytics the first thing that's selected is the last thing. And so there's little things like that where I think looking at all this stuff holistically and then aligning it with some of the left nav research will help find our direction from there, because there's another issue out there that says every page should have a first sub menu landing page. So
Yeah, there are other related issues, and clearly it's come up like before, and it's annoying enough to have the CEO interest tag on it and be discussed at that level, but it in my mind is much more around like consistency. We just need a consistent pattern for this. We probably need to test what makes sense to our users, but also what makes sense given whatever ultimately we do to rearrange that left nav. If we shift things out of different groups and break things up or organize things a little differently, or at least make recommendations for that, I think whatever our recommendation is should include a standardization of this pattern, and so it's applied consistently.
Okay, so there's two parts to it. There's the interaction, and then there's the question of, should there be a landing page, or does it even make sense to have requirements list or issues list, that sort of thing? Okay.
Right. So I think that, yeah, the real, this is what looks like probably a hastily written issue. And it's from a year ago, so it doesn't have a ton of context, but and I think even the screenshot's out of date because the icons look wrong. But the general gist of it is like there's a top level net of item for something like CI/CD, and you click that. Where does it go? Is that the first item on the
For most of
submenu?
them, yeah, for most of them it is. I think the only thing that I remember from the top of my head is value stream. It's analytics goes to value stream now, because I think that's probably the one that's either the one that came first or the one we're trying to highlight for some reason. But I think it goes to value stream, and that's the one that's all the way at the bottom. The usual pattern is for that top level one to pop up to that first item, which is why which also is not necessarily ideal, but it's interesting that analytics is the one that differs from that.
Yeah, and in particular, something like issues where it says issues and then list, like it is a little repetitive. And I think the suggestion in the issue that was linked here in the agenda was like, don't make that top level one clickable when you're looking at a expanded list, because then you have two targets that go to the same place. I would say alternatively, we remove the concept of these lists pages and full, it's one less item that needs to be on that view, because it's the default view. Or actually, no, you wouldn't remove it from the view, but it potentially you don't need to make the title clickable once you've expanded it or something like that. I'll leave the solution in more capable hands, but know that there's some pretty a pretty high level of interest in getting that figured out as we shift our focus to the left nav in general.
Okay. Yeah, and so I mentioned mobile earlier, but I realized that not just mobile, it's also when that left sidebar is collapsed is when it's even more important, because when it's expanded, if you click on the top level one, you can see that it's gonna highlight list. But when it's on mobile, it just looks like two different locations you can go until it expands. So I see. Or when it's collapsed.
There's other discussions on this issue related to that, and just like some input from the foundations team already. So I think we just need to fold whatever solution we come up with into what we recommend the new architecture of the left nav information architecture would be.
Good. But yeah, so that was my main update, is that I'm currently working on analysis. They were very interesting sessions. Definitely brought up a lot of questions around project level versus group level, and how to even talk about finding things that are global, like in your instance versus in a project versus in a group, how we have all these different search bars and filters everywhere. And users were kind of having some trouble figuring out which one to go to first to find something depending on the level. So there was a lot of interesting things around that. And then another interesting thing that came up was when trying to switch from a project to another project, the specific task that I gave them was to switch from an issue board in one project to an issue board in a different project. And that was when there was a lot of like, do I just click back into the breadcrumbs, like define the group and then click back into it? Or should there be a simpler way to go from the issue board in one place to an issue board in another place? I thought that was an interesting one that came up. And then from a project to a group, it was also anyway, I don't know why I'm starting now. I will basically be working on pulling out the themes from that and some of the interesting patterns that I saw, but
Very interesting. I was just so in the solution validation that wrapped up last week, and this week I'm still going through the notes. My goal for today will be sharing out the insights notes for the top nav consolidation, but the main things that I tested there was like consolidating project groups and more into one, the user menu simplification on the top right, and then switching between different projects. So one issue board to another issue board. I took that kind of task directly from your discussion guide, Catherine, and then used that in mind to like help find some parity in our research findings. And yeah, some interesting bits in there about making it simpler to navigate, and I'll go in more detail in that issue, but one of the things we explored was having navigations within the breadcrumb, so like a drop down like in the breadcrumb area. And yeah, people really liked it, but I have concerns about introducing another area to like potentially switch your context. So that's probably the thing that I'm going back to take a look at the bigger theme, which is like switching between projects and groups. Because some people were like, yeah, sometimes I switch between issue boards, but like of projects and then the group issue board, because those are different too. So they were like, oh, this drop down should also allow me to switch groups. And I'm like, oh, this is getting wild. And that's probably why I want to hold back on switching the breadcrumb, because it won't be a consistent experience across all areas of the product. And like, let's say one project has a wiki and the another doesn't, then where are you going to take them back home? And it's like, cool, like in that instance it does that, but sometimes for another project it doesn't do that. So we'll probably introduce more inconsistencies in the world, but there are some bigger themes around like switching projects and groups and how do you make them easier. So that's probably one of these things that we'll take on as a actionable insight to like do more research on a better solution to switch between projects and groups. Interestingly enough, in the consolidation of projects, groups, and more, people thought that they could just search projects and groups in the dropdown like together, because no one knows what's going on between projects and groups. So it's just like, oh, I wish that was combined. So that was, yeah, an interesting thing there. Yes, so that's the goal for today, just sharing out those insights and hopefully kick things, like set things up nice for post time off. And the other thing that I was looking at yesterday was just refining some of the patterns around how we might do tables. Let me add a better link into the description. So, yeah. So I think I'm in an okay position to start looking at writing a discussion guide for settings and kind of framing that to help understand what we want to, who we want to recruit for. for the settings and the settings solution validation. So yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much the things for me this week and this year.
Very much in a getting it all together and analyzing mode as well. It's really cool, but you have to like go into each video and see where they were going. So that's kind of the rest of this year for me as well. Oh, another one though, another interesting one was I had people try to find the gitlab.org group because I know that's something that I run into challenges with a lot. And that one was an interesting chase because sometimes people would try to first start by searching in the groups dropdown, just gitlab.org. But since it wasn't, and I don't really know what the logic is, but it wouldn't show up there in the search, I guess because it's not their group. And so then they would click on maybe explore projects, explore groups, and then try to search for it there, and it wouldn't show up first. And then they had to kind of do this sorting and all kinds of things to try to just get the gitlab.org group to show up. So there was definitely something there about finding that specific group, but maybe that's also a concern for finding groups in general. Yeah, that was interesting.
I'll say that if GitLab.org is not on my frequently visited, I can't get to it easily. The box, I mean, it just like I type in GitLab and it's pointless.
But why? Like, this has been a question I've had on my head.
I don't know. I believe there's an issue. I don't know where it lies, and it is certainly something we can pick up if and when we work on that change around the projects and groups menu. But the logic behind that search feels quite odd.
We have time for your point, Eric?
Yep, I think we do. So this will be interesting. I just wanted to share my intention is to review this opportunity canvas with folks probably the second week of January when everybody's kind of back in the office and we're back up and running. And get review from the product leadership team and potentially some folks from design, but thought I'd run through it with you almost as a dry run and share how I'm thinking about this rich text editor from a product standpoint and our the potential opportunity we have there, because we haven't reviewed these as a team before. The opportunities with the static site editor were fairly technical and well-defined. This one is one where there's a little bit of a larger business case to make and just kind of sharing a little bit more context with everyone about why we're building it. So let me just share my screen. This will be the first time outside of one-on-ones that it's been shared, but for anybody watching the video, this is what our opportunity canvas looks like. And yeah, I think that right now, the primary focus or the primary opportunity is driving consistency among editing experiences, and in particular, this one around rich text editing experiences. So working with content that would typically have been written in Markdown, but you would like to have some styling to. It's not code, in other words. The issues that I link to are very much related to the architecture that we've been working on, that Enrique's been working on for several milestones. I feel pretty good about the problem space and how sure I am that this is a problem that exists. We have a pretty well documented opportunity in the static site editor, but when it comes to the business case in the larger GitLab ecosystem and GitLab product, there are plenty of issues and feature requests for WYSIWYG style editing, and there's been explorations in the past as we've learned about implementing this in the rich text editor. I don't know why this is not loading, but I could have just. Oh, I'm still on Zoom, so my internet's not down. Anyway, I think the interesting thing about this is the customer is slightly different, although we aren't necessarily ignoring our current customers. This would ideally open us up to more collaboration among product managers, designers, support, sales, and other personas that are less familiar writing in code or Markdown, allowing them to more confidently and more quickly contribute to issues, to wikis, to the static site editor, and anywhere this is implemented. Some of the problems that they run into here that I've noticed, and this is where I think you can both challenge me or add any context or let me know if I'm not hitting this right, but for me, it's really about confidence. It's about, like, anybody can learn what one hashtag and two hashtags like end up, pound signs, what those do in Markdown, and anybody can go reference a Markdown link and copy and paste it. And we do have some quick actions in like the issue boxes that help a lot, but the confidence comes into play when you are toggling back and forth between the writing view and the preview view constantly to just make sure that your formatting is correct, that it's going to look good in the end. Personally, like, I never use the preview because I know relatively what Markdown is going to look like, but I've messed up syntax before, and so I hit submit on something and I have to go fix it because it's probably like more muscle memory for me that I'm just going to write and then find mistakes later rather than preview. But for those that aren't as familiar with Markdown, there I think is a lot of friction around the, like, I'm going to type a little bit and then wait, did I get that right? I'm going to switch over to preview it. I don't know. Oh, now I got to go back. I can't write in the preview, so I'm going to go back and write some more. And where was I? And now my train of thought might have left the station, so to speak. So I think there's a pretty that's at the root of some of this. It's not that Markdown is inherently difficult to learn, but even after you learn it, the basics, and even some of the more fluent Markdown authors will still find that, writing tables is a lot of trial and error. Like you don't just write a complex table from raw Markdown. You either paste it in from somewhere else, or you do a lot of like trial and error, flipping back and forth and previewing. Yeah, I mean, the secondary goal here, I guess, is that we're addressing potentially a workaround that's happening, and that's like writing locally. So sometimes, people write in their local IDE or a local Markdown text editor, or even Google Docs or something like that. They'll author a more lengthy response or a like an issue description or something like that, and then copy and paste into GitLab. Keeping people within the GitLab ecosystem, I think, is going to benefit us in the long run, and making it easier will help us grow numbers of seats and stuff like that within organizations that already have GitLab, because people will be more inclined to do their work right in the product. At least that's my hypothesis. I don't know. I guess these numbers are on our performance indicator page, which is public. So there's nothing sent. We can record this and put it public. But I'm estimating our reach, and this is the important distinction that I want to hit about both the work we're doing with Editor Lite and the potential rich text editor here, aligning our editing experiences around a single like editing engine is going to allow us to learn a lot more about how people write and edit content within GitLab, because we'll be able to consolidate those actions in a aggregated and deduplicated way, so we can really see how many users are editing code in GitLab or editing prose in GitLab, and how many are doing it outside in their IDE or somewhere else. My guess is somewhere around a 400,000 user, monthly active user like target once we roll this out, because I think we have a combination of wiki issues, epics, MRs, static site editor, potentially snippets, which I should add here. Which I need to get the numbers for, but that's several thousand. Now I don't anticipate, as far as business case goes, I don't anticipate us, selling on this feature. This isn't something that we're going to go like increase our like sales pipeline just because of this feature. But I do expect to see greater efficiency in people's collaboration, which would hopefully drive some growth, both in overall usage and growing seats within existing existing customers, existing installations. So fairly confident about that. Honestly, I think the only thing that's an unknown is nailing the experience, and that's where Michael will have to finesse this and make sure that we're not over-indexing on the WYSIWYG stuff and still allowing pro users and people who are fluent in Markdown to write in a way that's familiar. Slack being the most recent and most visible offender in this space recently, where they introduced that sort of WYSIWYG bar in the message bar, and everybody who's used to writing in Markdown all of a sudden couldn't. I think that our architecture and the proposed libraries that we're using will solve for this right out of the box, but it's something we need to certainly be aware of. Anyway, skipping ahead, because we don't need to talk about this forever, but one of the things I'm really interested in actually came up recently related to a very specific issue, and that was a request that I think had been around for a year or two to integrate Drawio diagrams into the wiki. And it also, I think, there's an issue for integrating it with like issue descriptions. And the opportunity we have here, to sum it up, is if we have a rich text editor that is extensible and reusable across multiple categories, then what we can do is implement the rich text editor in multiple places and extend it once to support Draw.io. Now, once we finish that work, the wiki can use it, snippets could use it, static site editor could use it, issue descriptions could use it, and anywhere we implement the rich text editor, we could inherit the ability to parse and display Draw.io diagrams. So, not saying that's our #1 priority, but it did come up as something that has a lot of thumbs up for that issue. And I think a lot of people would be happy to see it. And being able to implement that once and roll it out to multiple categories would be pretty compelling. I won't hit every box, but that's kind of just, I think from a product strategy level, I hadn't really done an overview like this with many people about the larger opportunity with the rich text editor, and figured I'd share here and continue the discussion among the group for whoever's interested.
Yeah, this was super interesting. And I personally am very interested in it because I have learned Markdown over the years, but still I am in the population that's constantly switching between preview and like the other field. That spoke to me. So super interesting to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the work we did in static site editor pretty well validated that like Markdown can be tricky, and it's not the syntax itself. It's like a mindset when you're writing in an environment that's unfamiliar, and confidence in the final output is ultimately the anxiety. That the root of all that anxiety, I think, is the lack of confidence that what you're writing will translate. You generally, not, I'm not trying to generalize your feedback, but you know what I mean? So yeah, anyway, that is something that I'll hopefully be getting, alignment on and feedback on in the coming weeks after the holidays, and then hopefully implementing fairly rapidly after that. I think it's one of the larger opportunities we have for our group, and this is a good time to do it because of the focus on settings and nav has allowed us to maybe slow down on like just strictly feature development in other categories. We can kind of tidy up the underlying editing engines, so so that we come out from the settings and nav work from the other side of that with a really strong foundation. I think just it's mentions in here, but for the record, I think probably what we would do is get this running in Wiki first, because it's such a highly requested feature, but a relatively low impact category for it to be implemented in. Like if we disrupted all of issues, I feel like there's going to be a lot more edge cases when we introduce this in the MR description and issue description. Wikis are fairly predictable in their content, at least wikis written in Markdown. And certainly we would do a phased and feature flagged rollout. We're not just going to go live 100% by default, but I think wikis and potentially snippets would be interesting areas to explore. And then clearly we want to apply this to the static site editor, but there's going to be actually a little more work to get that feature complete with the extensions we built on top of the editor now. So things like image uploads, and it'll take a milestone or two to get feature parity there. So we just have to figure out when we want to invest in that time.
That sounds good. I think all that sounds really good, and I was just curious on like potential area of first steps, and you covered that with the wiki as a potential one. So I agree with most of all that. I'll dig deeper into the Canvas map post time off.
Yeah, please do. Let me know if you have any feedback. And with that, we can wrap up. I'm keeping you already a couple minutes late, but I'll let you get on with it.
I always forget that this meeting is 40 minutes.
Yeah.
It's neither 30 nor 50. It's 40 minutes.
It's just, I want to go specifically 40 minutes. No, well, I know this is a early morning for you, Michael, but I don't want to interfere with your routine. So let you get your day started. Enjoy your last day before break.
I know.
While all of us suckers have at least one more day.
Wait. Yeah. We're like, okay, no, we have one. I was about to say 2. Then
Friends and Family Day on Friday. Yeah. Okay. I guess at this point, the time zones have all shifted so that everybody in the company is on their has at most one more day before Friends and Family Day.
Yeah. All right. Good
chatting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. See you later.